Colin, thank you very much for joining us today. How are things in Vancouver?
Really, really nice. Thank you very much for having me.
So, Premier American Uranium is a new company for me, so I'm looking forward to learning more about it. And Premier is focused on acquiring uranium assets in the US and more specifically, exploration and development assets. Now, I'm curious why you're focusing on that aspect and why not something more closer to production.
Well, I think primarily it has to do with, there's a scale to acquisition, and as we grow this company through our acquire, explore, develop strategy, at some stage we intend to be larger and capable of making acquisitions, let's say up the chain. But primarily we what makes the acquire, explore, develop model work is our ability to go and find things at our earlier stage, spend some money, develop them, and expose the value that way. So it's kind of two-pronged. I mean, we're not at the scale yet where most acquisition of more advanced companies would be very, very expensive, but also because we have a belief that we can expose value and extract value by finding earlier stage things, leveraging our technical team, and generating value for shareholders that way.
And in line with this strategy, you recently announced the acquisition of nuclear fuels. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this company and what was the rationale for doing so?
Well, it's a really important company for us. It was one of the primary targets within our pipeline. It has a really very, very interesting large project in Wyoming in the Powder River Basin, our Cyclone project in the Great Divide Basin. Um, we've been successful drilling it. We really like Wyoming as a jurisdiction. There's three other projects in Wyoming besides the flagship KC project within nuclear fuels. Overall, it more than doubles our footprint in Wyoming. It has an exploration target on there on the KC project of 11.5 to 30 million pounds, backed by a 43-101 technical report. So our Cyclone project has a 8 to 12.5 million pound resource exploration target. So on the low end, you're increasing our exploration target in Wyoming by 150%, on the high end 250%. So just a really, really good way of increasing our footprint in a very attractive state. And we love the positioning of the project. It's not far from two existing producers that are ramping up, and we think that that's going to be very, very strategic a couple of years down the road.
And Colin, can you tell us how was the deal funded?
It's an all-share transaction. It's 0.33 PUR shares for each nuclear fuel share. The resulting company is going to have a market cap based on current pricing of over $100 million, substantial, really well financed. But it all share transaction, no cash in the deal, which is the most efficient way for us to go out and make acquisition.
And when is the expected closing of the deal?
Expected to close in Q3, probably close to late August.
And once the deal closes, how will the shareholder base look?
Well, one of the strongest things about PUR and nuclear fuels is the shareholder base. I mean, PUR was spun out of Consolidated Uranium just prior to acquisition by ISO Energy. And so we've got ISO Energy at 10%, but very, very interesting and attractive to me as a former analyst leaving to join this company back in March of 2024 was Sachem Cove's positioning, which is a, one of the most prevalent uranium investment funds in the US. They own 36% of our stock almost, and the one of the co-founder, obviously co-founded by Mike Alkin, who runs the investment fund, and Tim Rotolo. Tim Rotolo continues to be the chairman of our board, so extremely strong platform between ISO Energy, Mega Uranium, Sachem Cove, and Encore, being a major shareholder of nuclear fuels, will continue to own about 10% of the pro forma company, which is really, really important to us. They're a shareholder of us already. So it just, I don't think you'll find as strong of a shareholder register in any exploration focused company in the uranium sector.
Yes, those are the right shareholders to have. Now, once the deal closes, how many assets will you own and how many states will you be? located in?
There'll be 12 assets in the portfolio in total in five historically productive uranium states, with a focus in, with the bulk of that in Wyoming and New Mexico, which are two of the largest producing states in U.S. history.
Colin, as you mentioned, many of the assets are in the state of Wyoming. And can you speak to this jurisdiction and how is the state and how are the local governments toward mining?
Wyoming being one of the most prolific historic producers in the U.S. 250 million pounds of historic production coming out of Wyoming. Wyoming's one of three agreement states in the U.S. that has uranium processing facilities within its agreement with the federal government. So what that means is that permitting of uranium projects in Wyoming happens almost entirely at the state level. That's been a big advantage for existing operators in Wyoming. We've seen in the last kind of decade and a half, we've seen multiple new projects receive permits, get built, go into production. So Wyoming, in my opinion, extremely favorable state for uranium for uranium asset exploration and development.
And at one time, the state of Wyoming was one of the top uranium jurisdictions in the world, but it no longer is. Why?
I think uranium price had a lot to do with that. I mean, historic production in the modern era, historic production, we saw certain ISR operations by some major producers, thinking of Smith Ranch Island from Cameco, among and some of the neo producers that kind of turned on production in kind of in and around Fukushima. That had an extremely strong impact on uranium price, as we know. And we saw the price drop, and we saw a lot of those assets transition to care and maintenance. And we're slowly starting to see the revival of those assets with multiple operations in the state, either in the process of turning production back on or with a plan to. So I think that Wyoming will be one of the first and states and a leader in uranium production for the United States. But certainly uranium price and low cost sources external to the US had a lot to do with the demise of uranium production in Wyoming.
So one of your primary properties there is Cyclone, and last year you and your team initiated a drilling campaign of 46 holes. Maybe you can just speak to this and what were the results?
We had that was the inaugural drill program for the Cyclone project. We have two main targets on the Cyclone project. One's called Cyclone Rim, the other's called Osborne Draw. We drilled 41 holes. For almost 21,000 feet at the Cyclone Rim target. We were successful in establishing a half-mile trend of uranium mineralized holes that met the cutoff and GT cutoff grades for potential inclusion in a future resource. So extremely successful there. After completing 41 holes at the Rim target, we moved over to the Osborne Draw target, drilled 5 holes, 4 of which were mineralized. They two of them, two pairs, were over a mile apart, and both had uranium mineralization in them. So we were really excited to see those results, and we were very encouraged by the results we got at the bigger portion of the drilling over at Cyclone Rim. So in July of this year, just a few weeks away, we'll go back to Cyclone Rim and start drilling in the areas where we had a lot of success. Moving that process of working to delineate a resource there, moving that along.
And how many rigs do you plan on having and how many meters?
That'll be a single rig program at the Cyclone project. It'll be about 25,000 feet. Or sorry, probably about 21,000 feet, depending. That is kind of the continuation of the drilling that we started last year. It was all under the same permit. So based on the results of that program, we'll work to in at Cyclone to increase the drilling intensity in future programs. But it'll be about 21,000 feet, and we're going to be targeting the areas where we saw the best results last year. So I'm hopeful and confident that we're going to have something to show for that.
And do you only drill in the summer or can you drill in the winter also?
The drilling window for us at Cyclone Rim is July to usually seasonally constrained by mid to late October. It's that's in the Great Divide Basin. That's kind of our window. Where in the Powder River Basin, where Nuclear Fuels KC project is, they've already begun drilling, so they can start drilling a little bit earlier than us up there, and they've got a 100,000 foot initial component already underway for their drill program. So one of the things that we liked about the acquisition is that it increases kind of the calendar spread where we can generate news flow from our key projects. So it creates a more newsy company in addition to the scale that we add with that acquisition.
So let's move on now and talk about New Mexico. And your most advanced project there is Ciboletta. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, it's definitely pronounced a few different ways from a few different people, but Ceboleta is very good.
And it has a resource of 23.5 million pounds, and you're working toward an updated resource. When can we expect the results, and will they be significantly larger?
Yeah, I mean, just to add to what you said, the 23.5 million pound resources are indicated plus inferred. 80% of that's in the indicated category. The plan for this summer is to update that resource and alongside produce a preliminary economic assessment for that project. It's probably 6 weeks away. We're dealing with the very last parts of refining that model, interacting with the independent qualified person to just refine the portions of that. So we're excited to be in a position to deliver that in the not too distant future. The main component or source for the resource upgrade is it's really been a desktop exercise. When we published the 23.5 million pound combined resource back in June of last year, there was a significant amount of data on the project that hadn't yet been digitized, and it wasn't in a condition that it could be modeled. So we've since done that desktop exercise and digitized that data, handed it over to the QP so that they could model it. So that's where we're looking to get an incremental increase in the resource from.
And once you receive the new resource in the PEA, what are the next steps?
Well, then, once we have preliminary economics in hand, the next steps will be certainly we have a drill permit that we received. So we have two existing Part 3 drill permits for New Mexico that allow us to do some additional drilling. Some of that drilling is going to be focused on kind of where we see the low-hanging fruit in terms of resource extension and expansion. But some of that drilling will also be dedicated to some targeted core drilling. Once you get preliminary economics, you have to start kind of backfilling that and de-risking it with confirmatory metallurgical holes. So we'll be collecting core to carry out some test work that we think is going to be augmentative to the project and necessary to refine the assumptions within the PEA. So a mix of technical and resource extension drilling is likely. The timing of that could be later in 2025, could be 2026. It really depends on a little bit on the market and how aggressive or conservative we want to be with our cash resources.
And I'm glad you brought that up. How much cash do you have?
On a combined basis, on a pro forma basis, the Nuclear Fuels and Premier have about $12 million. Based on our last stated balance sheets, I think in our presentation you see about 14 combined. There's been a bit of spending since then, but very, very healthy balance sheet with the combined companies.
And you mentioned that the nuclear fuels deal will close sometime in Q3. Once this deal is closed, can we expect further acquisitions at some point in the future?
It's definitely going to continue to be a focus for us. We're looking to build, but being careful. Our last acquisition closed in June of 2024. It's been about a year, and we're looking to close another one. But I think, our mandate or our strategy, acquire, explore, develop, we still want to be extremely careful about what we're acquiring, what we're paying. We want to make sure that we're acquiring things that complement our existing portfolio, like Nuclear Fuels does. We can leverage a lot of internal resources around permitting, data analysis, many, many things that make it the right acquisition And we'll continue to look to be careful and look for things that really augment our existing portfolio or that we think are so transformative that they can stand alone and add great value with by doing some work on our part.
Colin, you have a unique background in that before you became the CEO of Premier, you were a research analyst and focused on the uranium sector and other mining sectors. So you know the sector very well. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how you would characterize this current cycle that we're in compared to previous ones.
Yeah, I mean, before I'm as a publishing analyst, there's definitely a lot of quotes that you could pull about what I've said about the market, and it really hasn't changed since I left that seat a year ago. I think that this is by far the best fundamental picture that we've seen in my career and possibly in many decades for uranium. I mean, I still think that we're fundamentally undersupplied based on consumption being buffered by inventory and secondary supplies in some cases. But at no point at many points in the past, demand was fairly static and supply would slow down and price would go up and there'd be a supply response and that would quickly correct uranium price bumps. But in this scenario where you've got 31 countries trying to triple nuclear capacity by 2050, you've got the US going even further than that, trying to add 10 reactors by the end of, or have 10 reactors under construction by the end of the decade, actually trying to add 300 gigawatts of nuclear capacity to the existing 100 by 2050. I mean, the biggest civil nuclear fleets in the world are looking at pretty dramatic expansion. So what you've got this time is a supply deficit that needs to be corrected by higher prices, incentivizing new production. But on top of that, you've got an accelerating demand that most models aren't even accounting for the potential of SMRs to augment everything that I just said. So what the reason I think it's different this time is because we have a supply issue that needs to be solved with higher prices, but we've got accelerating demand as well. And those two things haven't really happened at the same time in my career. So very exciting time, I think, for me.
Colin, as we wrap up, you have a portfolio of early stage assets, and a big part of your job will be moving these projects forward and de-risking them, and in the process, unlocking value. Maybe you can just summarize for us how you're going to do that in the coming months and what sort of news flow investors can expect also from Premier.
Yeah, from a news flow perspective, I mean, we're drilling on a combined basis, we're drilling over 150,000 feet this year planned. So it's going to be very, very newsy from the Wyoming projects. We're going to be delivering a resource update and a PEA from our New Mexico project. So that really takes us from now to the end of the year in terms of new project level news. And when you add in the potential acquisition piece, we had a quite positive response to this acquisition announcement from the market. I think we can find other things that are going to be equally exciting. And I think when you ask how do we accomplish that, one of the most important things about this transaction is the increase in scale of the company overall. The larger we get, the easier it will be to execute the strategy and make acquisitions. So as we get bigger, I think we can accelerate the acquisition piece, and as we get bigger, we'll be able to put more money into the projects and generate more news flow. All of that kind of being the total execution of our strategy as a way to create value for shareholders.
Well, Colin, I want to thank you very much for spending time with us today and sharing your views on what's happening with Premier. Once again, thank you.
My pleasure. We're excited to deliver for the shareholders and for the platform. So thank you very much.